They're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring, other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
When people think of Vladimir Putin, they think of capital P, power. And that's exactly the impression he creates. Whether it's physical power, firing different weapons, riding in various James Bond-esque modes of transportation, or tossing hapless opponents in judo. Or political power, ruling his own country with an iron fist, crushing his political opposition, or, most recently, being accused of meddling in foreign elections for his own benefit. This is how Vladimir Putin went from a poor, tough kid in Leningrad to a KGB spy to the very symbol of modern Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born in 1952 in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. His father was a factory foreman and his mother a homemaker. It is widely said that Putin's public-facing tough guy persona can be traced back to him getting into fights when he was younger, which paved the way for him to take up judo. After getting a law degree from Leningrad State University, Putin joined the KGB Foreign Intelligence Service. He spent 16 years in the KGB. When Putin returned to Russia, he began his political career.
He went to work for Anatoly Sobchak, who was then the mayor of St. Petersburg.
That's Leonid Bershidsky.
I'm a columnist at Bloomberg View.
Putin thrived in Sobchak's administration because
he was sort of considered pretty efficient city official at that time. He was very loyal to Sobchak.
So loyal and efficient that
he was noticed by Yeltsin's close circle.
And those people soon brought Putin over to Moscow to work in Yeltsin's administration, where he quickly climbed the political ladder.
Then, of course, he was promoted to Prime Minister of Russia.
That's Dmitry Trenin.
I am currently director of the Carnegie Moscow Center.
Around this time, Yeltsin and the people around him, the so-called family, decided that Putin would become Yeltsin's successor. And then, this happened. The apartment bombings were carried out in 3 Russian cities, killing 293 people and injuring more than 1,000. Putin immediately accused Chechen separatists for the bombings and followed it up with action.
He was credited with having a very successful military campaign against the terrorists.
And it worked.
After that, he became an heir apparent in the eyes of the Russian people.
3 months later, Yeltsin resigned. And on his way out, a famous exchange.
He was getting into the car in the Kremlin, and the last words that he addressed to Putin before getting into his car was, "Take good care of Russia."
So Putin took over as president, and 3 months after that, won his first election. But just because Putin won the presidency, that didn't mean he had all the power. This is Michael McFall.
I was U.S. ambassador from 2012 to 2014. In the 1990s, there was a fire sale of all the things worth owning in Russia, and certain people,
The oligarchs.
did better than others in that fire sale, sometimes called privatization, and those people tended to be well connected with the Yeltsin regime, and they weren't Putin's friends. But they probably miscalculated, thinking that they could easily find a way to influence him. It became impossible almost from the start.
From that very moment, there was warfare between him and the oligarchs.
That's when Putin gave the oligarchs a choice. Putin's way,
Some of those people from the 90s managed to figure out a new way of dealing with Putin and have survived.
or prison.
Others could not find common vision, and so they lost their assets.
Khodorkovsky once was Russia's richest person, worth $15 billion, but he ran afoul of President Vladimir Putin and spent a decade in prison.
With domestic power consolidated, Putin focused on restoring Russia's global influence.
Putin is the guy who believes in the expansionist Russian state. Georgia and Ukraine and all the other Soviet republics that split off when the Soviet Union fell apart, he still believes that they're traditional Russian satellites. A lot of his strategy is about keeping them in the orbit. That Yeltsin line, take good care of Russia, that's how he understands it.
And he used annexation and invasion, as well as oil, gas, and trade to keep former Soviet republics in Russia's orbit. In 2008, Putin's 2 terms were up, and he decided to step down as president. Dmitry Medvedev stepped in as president, and Putin went back to prime minister. But really,
Putin never left power. He pretty much continued running the country, and Medvedev was a bit of a figurehead.
there was actually a period of cooperation between Russia and the U.S. that benefited both countries during Medvedev's presidency.
Because Medvedev did not have the same negative attitude towards the West as Putin did.
But when Putin came back to run for a 3rd term, in the lead up to the 2012 election, it is widely believed that both the presidential and parliamentary elections were rigged, and Russians took to the streets. Putin blamed the protests squarely on America, and more specifically, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
He believed that she had sent, and this is his words, a signal to demonstrators.
Still, Putin won by a huge margin and set about crushing the protest movement immediately upon his return to the Kremlin. Over the next few years, Russia's economy tumbled. Putin annexed Crimea, leading to sanctions. The price of oil fell drastically. The ruble hit a new low, and America played down Russia's influence, with Obama calling Russia
a regional power.
Despite all of that, Putin's approval rating remained sky high, and then an opportunity for payback.
I think I'd get along very well with Vladimir Putin.
In 2016, there was one candidate who called Vladimir Putin very smart.
Trump exhibited tolerance towards Putin's actions annexing Crimea, and similar views on NATO and sanctions.
Secretary Clinton didn't support any of those views.
Even though Putin denies any wrongdoing,
U.S. elections.
Yes.
the U.S. has accused Russia of being behind the leaking of 20,000 Democratic National Committee emails, which many say helped Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the presidential election. Which leaves us here, with the possibility of a President Putin until 2024, positioning Russia to be the world power he always imagined it should be.
Jack Ma is Asia's richest man and most recognizable business tycoon. He's the chairman of Alibaba, China's e-commerce giant and one of the 10 largest companies in the world. Yet he still wants more.
We know where we're going. We want to be the 5th largest economy.
Big words from the man some call Asia's Jeff Bezos. He's confident, he's charismatic, and he's definitely not the average CEO. This is how a poor school teacher went from the classroom to being one of the most influential multi-billionaires in the world. Ma was born in China's southeastern city Hangzhou in 1964. His parents were traditional musician storytellers. As a teenager, he started to learn English from foreign tourists after China opened up in the late 1970s.
And then for 9 years, Jack Ma hung around outside the Hangzhou Hotel, which is now called the Shangri-La. He would get up at 5 a.m. to talk to travelers.
That's Bloomberg technology reporter Lulu Chen.
And I cover China Internet for Bloomberg.
Ma failed China's National University entrance exam twice before being admitted to local teachers' college. He graduated in 1988. He applied for 30 jobs and got rejected, including from the fast food giant KFC.
When KFC came to China, come to us, say, 24 people went for the job. 23 people accepted. I was the only one guy.
Then Ma got a job at a local university and taught English there for about 5 years, earning just $15 a month. On the side, he started a translation company with several friends. During a company trip to the US in 1995, Ma had his first encounter with the internet at a friend's place in Seattle.
I searched the first word, beer. I don't know why, because it's easy to spell, baby. And I see beers from Germany, beers from USA, beers from Japan, but there's no beer from China.
So he searched for the word China instead and still couldn't find anything. And that got him thinking. He wanted to build something that would put China on the world's map.
He started China Pages, a Yellow Pages-like website, but it didn't take off. Then Ma joined a government agency in Beijing to help set up a website. By 1999, the internet stock boom had gripped Wall Street, and back in his Hangzhou apartment, Ma decided to try again. With his wife and a group of friends, Ma raised $80,000 and set up Alibaba, a site that allowed businesses to sell stuff to each other.
人家美国人强就强它的硬件，强就强它的系统建设，这方面确实比你早。但是玩信息玩软的，中国人的脑袋绝不比你们长。我们在座的所有人的脑袋绝不比你们长。
By 2000, Alibaba had raised $25 million from investors, including Goldman Sachs and SoftBank.
He had no business plan and zero revenue, but his eyes was very strong eyes.
In 2003, Alibaba started Taobao, a platform for individual sellers to trade with each other, and publicly declared war against eBay, who had started to make a foray into China.
Jack Ma has this famous saying that Alibaba is a crocodile in the Yangtze River, whereas eBay is a shark in the ocean. And if they fight eBay in the ocean, then they'll lose. But if they fight them in the Yangtze River, then they have a home base advantage.
In 2007, just 1 year after it forced eBay out of China, Alibaba debuted its business-facing division on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. But it delisted 5 years later as its performance sagged. But in 2014, Alibaba raised $25 billion in the world's biggest IPO in New York.
Everybody should have a dream. What if that dream comes true?
After achieving dominance in the business of e-commerce in China, Alibaba has been building an internet empire worth $472 billion, with businesses in cloud computing, online video streaming, movie production, healthcare, sports, retail, and even news media.
Alibaba buying into South China Morning Post really raised eyebrows. This is the largest English newspaper in Hong Kong, and it shows that Jack Ma's ambitions weren't limited to e-commerce. He wanted to influence not just Chinese users, but also overseas users as well.
The US has criticized Alibaba for allowing companies to sell counterfeit and poorly made goods, but in China, it enjoys the favor of China's government. It's part of Ma's company philosophy.
In love with the government, but don't marry with them.
Jack Ma is an extremely fortunate man for jumping on the internet sector so early. Note that this is a person who has no coding skills at all. He's a natural showman and a gifted public speaker and really able to convince others to believe in his vision.
Ma's vision of growing Alibaba to be the world's 5th largest economy faces strong competition at home and abroad. It will require more than just naked ambition and charisma, but Ma is great at getting himself in the right place at the right time. So far, it's served him well.
Peter Thiel is a walking contradiction. He got his bachelor's and Juris Doctorate from Stanford, but speaks out about the horrors of higher education, saying college is
as corrupt as the Catholic Church was 500 years ago.
He's a staunch supporter of the free press, yet he bankrolled a lawsuit to bankrupt an independent media company.
But these were not journalists.
And most of all, he's an immigrant and libertarian who's the most public supporter of Donald Trump in all of Silicon Valley.
What Trump represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away.
This is the story of how an openly gay, immigrant genius, libertarian billionaire went from tech contrarian to Silicon Valley's biggest Trump supporter. Peter Thiel was born on October 11, 1967 in Frankfurt, West Germany, to Suzanne and Klaus Thiel. Peter's family emigrated to Cleveland, Ohio when he was 1. An Ayn Rand devotee during his youth, Thiel attended Stanford University majoring in philosophy.
His Stanford experience shaped a really big part of who he decided to surround himself with.
That's Lizette Chapman.
And I cover technology and venture capital here at Bloomberg.
He and his Stanford friends made their first big splash in tech with PayPal. After selling to eBay for $1.5 billion, they would become known as the PayPal Mafia for each incredible success after PayPal. For Thiel, that began with an early, modest $500,000 investment in Facebook.
And in VC speak, early means big risk, but also big reward. He turned that initial $500,000 investment into more than $1 billion in cash.
But Thiel was just getting started with Facebook, and he went on to make a whole bunch of wildly successful investments.
From SpaceX to Airbnb to one of the largest, most powerful companies in the United States, if not the world, and of course that's Palantir.
The incredibly controversial secretive data mining startup he founded with his colleagues from PayPal. It connects data silos and then allows non-technical people to search that information for patterns. Data like
financial information, feeds from video cameras, biometric details, passport information, flight manifest.
Palantir doesn't talk much about how they collect this data, who has access to it, or what they do with it. But they have contracts with
the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission
and several other federal agencies. It's the richest company you've never heard of, valued at $20 billion. But there are plenty of obscenely wealthy people in Silicon Valley. What makes him different...
He's a complex ball of multiple contradictions.
Take college, for example. Even though college was extremely important for Thiel, there's something called the Thiel Fellowship.
In exchange for dropping out and a promise not to pursue college, Thiel would give them $100,000 each.
You basically tell people that if you get a diploma, you're saved. Otherwise you go to hell. You go to Yale or you go to jail.
Also, his relationship with the press.
Here's another contradiction. He's donated to free press initiatives, including the Committee to Protect Journalists.
But he also secretly spent tens of millions of dollars bankrolling a lawsuit filed by Hulk Hogan over the publication of a sex tape and bankrupting the independently run Gawker Media. Why did he do this? Because in 2007, one of Gawker Media's blogs, ValueAg, outed him as gay. And with the lawsuit, he
found an opportunity to get back at them by funding the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan was able to bring then, but he wouldn't have been able to do that without Thiel's money.
And finally, Thiel's biggest contradiction, his endorsement of Donald Trump.
When he was asked about his support for Trump, he was surprised at the outrage that came with it from many of his colleagues in Silicon Valley. He didn't want more of the establishment.
No matter how crazy this election seems, it is less crazy than the condition of our country.
After briefly supporting Carly Fiorina in the primaries, Thiel pivoted to Trump, donating $1.25 million to Trump and his associated super PACs in October 2016. And he didn't just help Trump financially. He gave a full-throated keynote speech supporting Trump at the Republican National Convention.
I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
And when Trump was finally elected, Thiel was given the reins to an enormous amount of power.
And I want to thank you, man. You have a very special guy.
He was named the transitional advisor. And in that role, he did a lot of interviewing and a lot of vetting to fill hundreds of cabinet positions and different jobs within the administration.
But it turns out, Thiel's support isn't unconditional.
Talking to people who spend time with him, I have also heard that he is no longer a great supporter of Trump.
It was reported that Thiel was unhappy with the direction of Trump's presidency. Ever since, he's been mum, making no public appearances, no statements, and staying out of the spotlight altogether. Although there have been suggestions that Trump could tap Thiel for a top intelligence post or ambassadorship, there's no indication he'd accept.
He's described his relationship with politics as schizophrenic. He gets really involved, and then he runs away as fast as possible.
Whether Thiel takes a new position or simply continues as a board director at Facebook and Palantir, at just 50 years old, he's primed to wield some serious influence in technology and politics for decades to come.
2016 was again the hottest year on record, and the previous 17 years have seen our 16 most scorching. Scientists overwhelmingly agree. Global warming is the culprit. And it's just getting started. Ice caps, extreme weather, wildfires, droughts, and the hits keep coming. What are we doing about it? In 2015, the world took its boldest step yet to stem climate change with a historic accord in Paris. But now comes the hard part. Nations must change energy policies and invest huge amounts of money, and they will likely do it without the United States. President Donald Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would withdraw from the accord.
The reality is that withdrawing is in America's economic interest and won't matter much to the climate.
Here's the situation. Decades in the making, the Paris Agreement united the U.S., China, and more than 190 other nations in a push to limit fossil fuel pollution. The UN-sponsored plan secured pledges to cut greenhouse gases, the emissions that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, in an effort to avoid the rising seas and other environmental disasters that climate models predict. But even if all pledges are met, the globe is expected to warm by as much as 3.4 degrees Celsius this century, more than the UN target of well below 2 degrees. Meeting the Paris Agreement means that governments will have to offer more incentives for clean energy, scale back support for fossil fuels, make emissions more costly, and reduce deforestation. It's estimated that the deal will require $13.5 trillion of spending through 2030. Here's the argument. Unlike past climate pacts such as the Kyoto Protocol, each country set its own Paris targets and then promised to revisit and improve them. The U.S. was primed to play a lead role in climate change, but Trump's Energy Independence Executive Order reverses Obama-era rules and directives put in place to combat climate change, and expands production of coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel. The resulting policies threaten the global fight against climate change. Without the U.S. commitment to emissions reduction, other countries may join it in abandoning the Paris Agreement. This could make it almost impossible and even more expensive down the line to stop climate change. Optimists argue that the shift to a lower carbon future is already underway. Businesses, cities, and U.S. states, such as California, are already investing in wind and solar and taking other steps to make it work.
I've actually been called an environmentalist, if you can believe that.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. Origins of the creative content of a lot of the work at Light Bright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch, some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file, and we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes our guide for what we're going to bend the neon to. We take from the office into the glass shop. We pick out the right size tubing with the right color for the right size project. From there, we heat up the glass tubing. The torches heat the glass well in excess of 1,000 degrees in order for it to get into its molten state. We heat up and bend the glass tubing to match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, and we can control the pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. After we've bent various components, we have to go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics. Going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water and salt that's heated to your body temperature, and it allows for all sort of external stimulation to fall away. And your internal world really begins to bubble up and manifest. You really get to experience a different relationship to your mind. I work with neon because I can't not work with it. It's so challenging and so rewarding. And those things are so intertwined that there's no way of separating it out. I learn so much and continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is open, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it. And we seal the tube off, sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. I think my favorite part of making a neon light is when I see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits a different wavelength. We bring it over to the aging table where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
Stop on profit for euro at 115.82. Position closed at 115.82. Profit £230.
bit like an addiction. You've got to make something. You have to do something. It's borderline obsession. And every bike we build is my favourite bike at the time, and as soon as it's done, I want to build another one. Sven Cycles is something I've been thinking about ever since I started cycling in my late teens. We want bikes that ultimately you'll really enjoy riding. There's never a bike that's the same. There's always a slight change. And as we build them individually as well, they have the marks of a bike that's built by hand. Most people I know cycle have an idea of their dream bicycle. And it may be an evolving idea you've had in your head.